Let's get the basics out of the way. What does GMAT entail? Right? So what is the GMAT? So the MBA.com website, which is the official website for GMAT, says that it's a exam. The GMAT exam is a standardized assessment delivered in English that helps business schools assess the qualifications of applicants for advanced study in business and management. Right? Now, what are the keywords over here? The keywords over here are the word that it's a standardized assessment. Correct? So it's a standardized assessment. That's one. And also it goes on to say that it's delivered in English, right? So very clearly it is not going to be delivered in each of the Indian languages or French or, and that it helps B schools assess the qualifications, right? So more than engineering or medicine, it helps assess the qualification and your fitment for a B school. But do you know what it really means? This is the real reason for it, right? The first reason is B schools need to have an objective measure or a criterion to assess how good you are vis-a-vis someone else, correct? So let's assume that they have two applicants, one scoring 63% from, say, Nagarjuna University in Andhra Pradesh, and the other one who's got 67% from, say, Ramaya Institute in Karnataka, correct? How do I know the difference? So a lot of times it becomes really hard to get to the differences when it's so small. So they need to have an object to measure. They need to make sure that you are able to handle the pressure of an intense MBA program. They don't want people to join and fail or not being able to complete the course because they didn't have the aptitude. So they're just going to make sure that everyone is measured on the same scale. The second thing is GMAT is also an important factor for B school rankings. How, in fact, when I say B school rankings, I would say how B schools are, what is the perception, correct? If I were to tell you that a particular B school has an average GMAT score of say 710, you obviously are going to be a lot more impressed than if I were to tell you the B school has an average GMAT of say 540, correct? So they are also looking at having higher GMAT scores, average GMAT scores of the incoming class. So the perception, because one of the parameters in most business school rankings is what is the outgoing salary, what is the incoming salary, what is the average GMAT score. It's a nice tangible number that most of these rankings can use for their measure. So B schools are also in a way pressurized to look at GMAT, right? Having said that, all the admission members that we have spoken to at most top schools, one thing that they always maintain is don't do, self-selection. Don't say, I got a 690, hence I'm not going to apply to ISB, correct? It's a myth, right? There are people with a 680, 690 scores getting into an ISB. The reason they are actually rejected is because of other factors. It is because of factors such as they were not able to articulate what they are written in their application during the interview. But a lot of times we feel GMAT is a nice way to, really pass the blame. And we say, well, my GMAT wasn't probably high enough. But yeah, so if you are going to apply to any school, make sure that your GMAT is around 30-40 points, in the range. So if the average GMAT for a particular school is 700, don't apply with a 500, right? I mean, it's like shooting yourself. Unless and until there is something really magnificent about your profile, the chances you're going to make through that B school is very bleak. Okay. So, the one thing that I tell about GMAT to students is, remember this about GMAT. A great GMAT score cannot guarantee your admission to a B school. But a poor GMAT score will guarantee that you'll be kept out, right? So GMAT in that sense is pretty important, correct? It's a make or break factor if you want to look at it that way. Coming to the actual GMAT structure, so very simple, 4 sections. First, AWA, which is an essay that you need to write on analysis of an argument. Uh, Not a big deal. If you are going to be doing critical reasoning, you will anyways cover analysis of an argument. You don't need to prepare for it separately. There are certain rules that you need to remember while writing an essay. Okay, so that's the only thing you need to remember. So 30 minutes gone in this. Then you have another 30 minutes of IR, which is the new section that has been introduced from June 5th, which is integrated reasoning. It contains 12 questions, out of which 8 would be graded, and you would be graded on a scale of 0 to 8. If you are good in math, you don't need to worry about IR. But if you are bad in math, well, you need to worry. Earlier you were worried only about the quant section, but now you are worried about the IR section as well. Correct? So you're now worried about one more section if you're weak in math. If you're good in math, you don't need to worry. After this, you will get a optional break of 8 minutes, and then you have the quant section. Then you have another optional break before you hit the verbal section. Now, so when do you actually take the so the first part is you need to be providing name of 5 schools to whom the scores will be sent. Very important. Okay. What it means is you can send it to any school that you want in the world. You have to pay for it, but because you paid already $250 towards registering for the test, they give you a offer. It's like, along with this, we're going to give you a freebie. Along with the data card, we're going to give you, say, 20 MB free. It's something like that. We give it for free. Don't waste too much time trying to figure out the name of 5 schools. I think a lot of students waste more time trying to worry which are the 5 schools they need to select than worrying about the test. Don't worry. Go with a gut feel. See, if you have already done some amount of research, there will be certain schools which you want to apply for sure. The problem is you will need to choose the schools before you see your GMAT score. Correct? So that's a very, it's a slightly tough thing, because you want to probably choose the schools provided you get a great GMAT score, or provided you get XYZ GMAT score, right? So you have to do this before the test starts, correct? So one point over here. So you will have some institution codes. You don't need to remember the institution codes. All that will be given to you is just a drop down. Once you type, for example, ISB, Indian School of Business, you will get the institution code over there. The second is the name as on passport. There is no other means of identifying yourself. PAN card, Aadhaar card, driving license, nothing works. They require your passport. If you don't have a passport, please apply for your passport, and the name on the GMAT scorecard will be exactly what is mentioned in the passport. Correct? So make sure that you get your passport done, and the name on the passport is the same as the name on the GMAT scorecard. Right? One thing that you should probably see and ask yourself is, if I'm going to be writing all that information when I start, so you take about 10 minutes. If you add the breaks, that is another 20 odd minutes. So you are looking at a test which could probably run into 4 hours. Okay? 4 hours is a long time. Trust me. Right? When you're sitting in taking the test, 4 hours can seem like eternity. And what is important is that you understand that by the time you get to the verbal section, towards the end, your mind would actually be under severe fatigue. It would all be drained of all the energy that it has. So solving questions in isolation is of no use on the GMAT while you're preparing. Remember this, you are expected to solve that question under test conditions. And test conditions mean when you are completely tired at the end of almost 3.5 hours of a grueling test. Okay. One thing over here, the first part, which is AWA, is measured from a scale of 0 to 6. Okay. That is the first part. The second part, IR, as I mentioned, is out of a scale of 0 to 8. Quant is out of 51. Okay, and verbal is also out of 51. Okay, so important that you understand this. All right, cool. So let's get on to the next one. How is the scoring? It is adaptive, correct? So when I say it is adaptive, what it means is all students start at a particular range. Okay, when they start at a particular range, depending on how they have done on the previous question or on how they will do the subsequent questions, the difficulty level of the questions themselves may change. Right? For example, if I have three test takers, one who is going across a pattern which is not working. If he goes along the pattern of getting the first three questions right, as opposed to a person who gets the next three questions, first question right and say the next question wrong, or the next two questions right. Third one, first two questions wrong, next three questions right. What you see is each of them end up with a different raw score. So the first three is right. Here it is like one right, then the next two right. Here the first two are wrong, correct? So depending on that, the end scores are evaluated. So what really happens is, think of the GMAT algorithm as someone sitting across the desk asking you questions, right? The moment he asks you, tougher, easy questions, he's going to start with average questions, right? He's going to say, what is the capital of India, right? You're going to say, well, New Delhi. Then he's going to say, well, what is the capital of Bangladesh? You're going to say Dhaka. Then he's going to say, well, what is the capital of Sri Lanka. Then he's going to go progressively, and finally he's going to say, what is the capital of, say, the African country Mali, okay, or what is the capital of Rwanda. But let's assume that you get all the questions right. The guy is going to say, well, this guy really seems to know everything. However, let's say that after a point, you are not able to get the questions right. Let's say that he asks, what is the capital of Bangladesh, and you say, well, I don't know. Now, instead of moving to a harder question, he's going to now ask you a same level question or an easier question. Correct? So what happens in the GMAT is, don't really worry too much on the algorithm part. This is just to give you an idea that the 51 questions that you see on the test, right? These 51 questions are not really based on, sorry, not the 51 questions. The 37 questions in quant and 41 questions that you see in verbal are not based on accuracy. It is not based on getting, say, 30 questions right or 35 questions right or 40 questions right. It depends on which questions you got right also. Okay, so a large part of this adaptiveness is constantly checking. Okay, constantly checking. So let me give an example. So let's say that you start off. And you start off with, let's say you start off with, I'm going to give you a very rough, let's say this is the 500 to 600 bucket, let's say this is the 600 to 700 bucket, and let's say this is the 700 to 800 bucket, right? To be in each bucket, you need to have an accuracy of around 40 to 60%. Greater than, less than 40% accuracy, you will go down, and if you have a greater than 60% accuracy, you move up. All right. So let's assume that you are in the first bucket, and the first 5 questions that you get say 4 of them right. That's an 80% accuracy. What is going to happen? You're going to be immediately put on to the next bucket. Again, caveat: it's a crude representation of what really happens in the algorithm, but you move to the next bucket. In the next bucket, what happens is you are now going to get, say, 8 questions. Right? Out of 8 questions, let's say you get 6 of them right. Correct? So when you get 6 of them right, the algorithm says, well, that's a 75% hit rate. This guy seems to be smart. Let you put him in the 700 to 800 bucket. Now, let's assume that you hit the 700 to 800 bucket and they ask you, say, another 12 questions, correct? And let's say you get only 6 of them right, which means you hit about a 50% accuracy. What it means is then you will continue to stay in this bucket. Neither will you be demoted nor will you be promoted, right? Let's say that, so how many questions have passed by? About 25 questions have passed by. Let's say this is quant, which means you have 37 questions, which means 12 more questions remaining. Let's say you do something really stupid in the last 12 questions and you end up making a string of mistakes. What's going to happen? You're going to be put from this bucket onto a lower bucket, correct? So constantly what is happening is the GMAT is checking which bucket you are really in, right? Where do you deserve to be? So unless and until you are scoring extremely high, right, like a 760, 770 plus, you need to get about 50-60% of the questions right most of the times, and you will do well, correct? Which is why it doesn't make sense to really look at accuracy. So let's assume what happened is that this person, instead of getting 6 questions right, ended up with 4 questions, okay, which means he had a 50% accuracy, which means he stayed in this bucket. And the next set of 12 questions that came, he was able to answer 6 questions right. What it means is he stayed in this bucket by just, though he got only 2 questions wrong, he ended up staying in this bucket. If you see the delta is only 2 questions, right? But he ended up staying in the 600 to 700, whereas the other person moved to a 700 to 800 bucket. Okay, so this is as far as the algorithm is concerned. Again, don't worry too much on the algorithm. Remember that you cannot beat the system, correct? You cannot beat it. It is just to optimize your approach. So 4 ways in which you can score well or score poorly, which is obviously the number of mistakes. If you want to get 800, get all the questions right, you will get 800, correct? So number of questions that you get right or wrong is definitely a huge factor. The position of the mistakes. Now, as we saw in the previous diagram, if you make more questions wrong towards the start of the test, you will be slightly more penalized as opposed to questions towards the end of the test. Okay, but all things being equal, do not make mistakes either at the start or at the end, correct? So just because it means that you got the first 10 or 15 questions right, it doesn't give you the liberty to make the next 20 questions wrong, correct? Or get a substantial number of questions wrong towards the end of the test. That's not going to help you. The third thing that is seen is the frequency of mistakes. So if you make a string of mistakes, okay, so let's say from question number 20 to question number 30, right, you get these questions 24, 25, 26, 27, like 4 questions wrong in a row, as opposed to getting question number 20, 23, 26, 27, and 30, right? If you get questions in a string, it is obviously going to go against you. And if you are in a position where time has run out, make sure that you go ahead and guess the answer. Never, ever, ever leave questions unattempted on the GMAT, because you're going to be penalized more heavily for leaving it unattempted rather than leaving it, rather than making it wrong. The other question is, a lot of people come and ask, is this an easy question or is this a hard question? You have to realize that there is nothing like easy or hard, right? A 750 guy may find a 500 question easy, and a 500 guy may find a 600 question easy, correct? Hard. So it depends on the position that you are in. If you go and ask a guy who's struggling at a 500, anything above 600 is hard. Whereas for a 750, anything below 700 is easy. So who decides what is easy or hard? Correct? So instead of saying easy and hard questions, the correct nomenclature is to say at what level would the test setter probably expect to put this question, right? And remember that questions don't get progressively harder till you end up making a mistake, right? That's a notion that people have. It is essentially taking you to a point where you are at a zone where you wouldn't get roughly equal number of questions right and equal number of questions wrong. Okay. Now moving from the algorithm to the actual scoring, this is a representative scoring. As I said, it's sort of 51. And in quant, if you see, you are it's a little bit more lenient than it is in verbal, correct? So in quant, if you make a few mistakes, you still slide down by just 1 or 2 raw scores. Whereas in verbal, if you make an equal number of mistakes, it kind of jumps by almost 5 to 10 points. Okay, which is why it is very rare to see scores above 40, 45 in verbal, whereas it is very rare to see scores below 40 in quant. Right? Usually people get, a typical Indian split is somewhere between 45 to 51 in quant and between, say, in the 30s. If you're looking at a 700 score, a 49 quant and a 38 verbal, for example, would give you 700. Okay, so the caveat over here is it doesn't take the position or the frequency of mistakes into account. Right? This is another table. You can take the quant and verbal score. So in case you are a little confused, what you can do is take any quant and verbal score. Right? So if you ask me why should out of 51, well, no one has the answer. Right? That is how GMAT has really come up with the raw scoring, and it has so 37. So why 37 questions in quant? Why 41 questions in verbal? We don't know. But at the end of the day, you only scored out of 51. Correct? So if you add both of them, right? So let's say you get 50 quant and 40 verbal, right? So what it means is you get 90. 90 means you will be at a 740 or a 750. If you look at the right hand side of the table, somewhere in the middle, it's a 740 or a 750. Correct? And in order to get a 50-40, it is not that tough if you think about it. You actually need to, you can afford making around 6 to 7 mistakes in verbal and around 5 to 6 mistakes in quant and still get a score of 740. Okay, so all is not lost. Okay, all right. So this is a short overview on GMAT. For any questions that you have, you can contact us on our website or just Facebook us or ask us on Twitter, which is Ask CrackVerbal, or you can simply subscribe to our blog. You can have an RSS feed where we provide information regarding the GMAT at frequent basis. Thank you.